All right, so at this point, looking at our to-do list, we've completed 3 major features. We have a way to handle videos, regardless of the size. Granted, we can't host them yet, which we'll talk about, but we have a way to handle the data about them. We have a way to actually organize them into playlists with an actual order in there. Now we actually need to take a look at seasons. Now, you might think that actually storing the data is, well, we still have a lot of work, and we do have work left to actually display the data, but overall now we have a really solid foundation to get there, and we're actually not that far away from being able to display it. Because if you look at the admin, this actually gives us a glimpse into what it's going to look like for our users as well. So we can go into playlists, we can have a list of playlists, and we can take a look at all of those things. So really what we need to do left for videos, other than displaying them, is actually just taking a look at one other major feature, which is having playlists of playlists. So what we want to do is actually take a look at the analogy of how this is going to work first prior to implementing it. So going into the reference.md, I have the playlist essentially imported, right? I'm not actually going to do this part. This is meant for illustration, so you don't have to copy and paste at this point. But the idea here is we've got one playlist that's called The Office, and perhaps in there, perhaps it has a featured video, right? Or a trailer, or even videos like clips and stuff like that. It definitely could for that main playlist, right? That's not that surprising. But then what it will also have is maybe season 1 of The Office, and then season 2, season 3, and so on. We want to have all of those seasons, which also might have featured video as well as other video clips in there that are going on, right? So each one of those is going to have that. But these right here should actually be associated to this first playlist itself, right? So really it should be something like this. Playlist equals to that playlist, and order being 1. And then coming down one more, saying playlist is still that playlist, and now order being 2. And then we kind of repeat this process for all of these things, order being 3. And I would probably want to also give the title being, season 1, season 2, and season 3. Right? And we can declare whether or not we want it published and all that. But notice that I'm still using the playlist model. Now, this is actually really cool because we can definitely do this. This technically can be done. And the way this would actually end up working then is for featuring all of our actual shows, we would say something like playlist.objects.filter. The playlist, the actual parent playlist, we would say underscore is null being true. So I actually don't want to call it playlist because that's going to start confusing both me and you. Instead, what I'm going to call it is just simply parent. So what is the parent playlist? What is the one that holds all of these things? And then I'm going to call this one parent as well. Cool. So that also means actually that I could, in theory, have another playlist of playlists like season 3's extras, and I could use that as the parent, right? So that also would allow me to do stuff like that. I don't actually recommend doing this just yet until you get really familiar with how to do this parent thing. So believe it or not, this is actually just another foreign key type object that we end up using on the model itself. So let's go ahead and actually implement this right here. So to do that, we're going to go into models.py for playlists. We're going to go to this playlist here, and we're going to quite literally write parent equals to models.foreignkey. And, well, you might be like, oh, well, let's just go ahead and use the playlist class and say on delete being models. Well, in this case, let's go ahead and do set null because of what I mentioned before, which was we can actually filter out different quote-unquote shows based on the parent being null. So I will allow this to be null. And you might be like, hey, that looks good. Let's just use that. But unfortunately, the playlist class itself doesn't actually reference itself this way. It references itself by just using self, much like in any sort of Python property or instance method. So it's actually just going to reference itself in this case, right? And then I can also go ahead and say that I want my parent order or just simply order, as in what order is this going to be inside of the parent playlist, we can do models.integer field and default being 1 as well. So then that way, when I actually do try to get the order of things, it does actually order correctly, or at least how I might want it to order. Okay, cool. So now, of course, when we run the migrations and stuff like that, we still need to check that there are child elements, which if there's a parent element, then there will be child elements. In other words, thinking of this in sense of the actual show itself is the parent element. Each season is a child of the parent element. So it's just underneath it. So to actually get one of those things, we would say show equals to playlist.objects.get, and let's just give it an ID of 1. And then my seasons would then be show dot, or rather, we could also do playlist.objects.filter parent equals to show. Right, so that's one way we will be able to do it. Another way, well, let's actually see what that other way will be. So first I'm going to go ahead and actually literally create these things in my database using the Python shell after we run our migrations. So let's go ahead and do that. Close out the server here. So python manage.py, make migrations, and then python manage.py migrate, and then python manage.py shell. Okay, so now let's go ahead and back into this reference. I'm going to make this series, and it's going to be really fun. I'm just going to copy and paste all of those things. Okay, so now, again, this is all the shows. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, paste it in here, and what do we got? We've got a playlist with 2 different shows. Now, what if I just did playlist.objects.all? How many playlists do I have? Well, a lot more than that, right? So the parent being true means that, yeah, we actually have a bunch of shows in here, and that's a quick way to grab it. If I want a bunch of seasons or just, child elements, I would say is null is, well, false. And that gives me the opposite. Those would be actual seasons in general, not specific to a specific playlist. So now what I can do then is I can grab a show. In this case, I think the show that I'm looking for is the object of 2. But to verify, let's just go ahead and grab our shows again. And I'll go ahead and say obj equals to shows.last. So this obj should be my office show. If I do obj.title, I should see the office series, and sure enough, I do. Now what I want is all the seasons below it, right? So obj dot, well, what do I do here? Let's just remember we can go ahead and call dir obj and take a look at all of the potential things that it could be, right? So we have parent in here. Well, this is the parent. Obj.title is the parent, so it doesn't have a parent. So obj.parent in this case should be blank. It should be empty. What I'm trying to do is find all of the playlists that are underneath this, and what do you know? There's something called playlist set. So my children for this one is obj.playlist set.all, and this now should be each season of that. So if I actually iterate through that, so for the PL in children, let's go ahead and for PL in children, print out the title. So PL.title, and what do you know? Season 1, Season 2, Season 3, and so on. Now, if I wanted to look at the actual videos for each one, I would say videos videos equals to pl.videos.all. Of course, this is not the ordered version. This is not the playlist items versions. It's just the videos. I could print this out. Now, for that season, for all of those seasons, there are no videos. So at this point, there's no videos showing up just yet. Which is fine because we didn't actually add any. But now we actually have this concept of being able to create parent elements and season elements as well. So this is actually already ready for a test. So we should be able to copy this over to our tests. And I'm going to come into test.py. This time I'm going to go ahead and say define create show with seasons. And it's going to take in self and we'll just copy and paste all of those things. I'm going to get rid of some of the comments in here because we don't need those any longer. Okay, and this is going to then be, I'll give my self.show being the actual, created item here. And then that probably should handle it other than self.shows. I don't know if I'll need that one. But what I will see is once I do create this, I have now a new total of 4 new playlists. So I'll have to adjust that as accordingly. So self.create show with seasons. And then there's 2 more playlists here. So what I want to check is to make sure that my playlist items are accurate. But I'm not going to do it manually. First, I'll go ahead and just run python manage.py test and see if I get any errors. And sure enough, I do. Right, so I've got the query set count tests in my test draft case is giving me a QS count of 5 is not equal to 1. Okay, so each one of these elements here are also in drafts state because I never published them. So my testing draft number should actually be 5 or whatever that number was when I created all of those initially. And in this case, it's giving me a test created count is not equal to 2, which of course we added 4 more, so granted 6. Okay, so now we've got that. Cool. So that actually solves the number that are being created. I'm usually not as worried about the numbers being created as I am other kinds of things, but that's okay. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to test the show has seasons. So I'm going to go ahead and define test show has seasons, and then we're just going to go ahead and say, well, what are the seasons? And the seasons are equal to self.show dot, this is going to be playlist set dot all. And we just want to test if it exists. So self.assert true seasons.exists. Okay, we run that and there we go. Sure enough, it does. And that actually pretty much satisfies most of what I'm trying to do here. I could add another part of this and just say that it assert equal and it's equal to 3 seasons or 3 actual playlists or sub playlists, right? So we just do count and then 3. And yet again, it should actually give me a valid item here. Cool. So now we've had the ability to add a parent playlist and all of the child playlist elements. Now, this same concept actually works in threading of any kind of models. So you'll see this on comments. Comment fields often will have something like this as well, where then you can have the parent element and then child elements, and then those child elements can also be parent elements with their own child elements as well. So yeah, this is something you'll definitely want to play around with as well, because it does get a little tricky. So the next thing would be, what about the admin, right? So the admin is now maybe a little lost. So python manage.py run server, right? So if we come in to the admin, we now have playlist of playlists. This is probably not great. So what I'll still need to do is update how that admin works.